man. Another episode of Fueled by Craft. I also am a big fan of college football. Now that the season is underway, with that week 1 being yesterday, I wanted to start covering college football, giving my opinions on the game. Week 1, a bunch of solid games. And let's just go right into it, starting off with Ohio State versus Texas. Texas came ranked as number 1 in the preseason polls, led by a nephew of Peyton and Eli Manning, Arch Manning. They were on the road against the Ohio State Buckeyes, the defending national champions, and they too have a new starting quarterback in Julian Sain. So this was going to be a real interesting matchup for many different aspects. Both powerhouse teams having a new leader and quarterback. Ohio State having to get 2 new coordinators, 1 new offensive coordinator, 1 new defensive coordinator. If I'm not mistaken, I've seen Ohio State lost about 14 to 15 players to the NFL draft last year. So a bunch of these teams, even though they were expected to be still really good teams, just had a bunch of question marks just because it was a lot of new. And with new comes questions. So both teams obviously expected to be dominant throughout this season. Both teams having a lot of new things going on. So with new things just comes questions naturally. So about that Texas-Ohio State game, Julian Sain looked really good. I really like how, even though he was at home, this is still his first start. So Ryan Day and the offensive coordinator just kept things really simple for him. Just make the smart throws. They didn't call up anything too crazy for him. He did have some really good throws that weren't considered completions just because receivers dropped the ball. I think Jeremiah Smith dropped a few balls. New tight end out of Purdue, Max, he dropped a good ball Julian threw. But outside of that, he was throwing the ball really accurate. He seemed to be processing the defense really well and just picking up what they were, picking up the looks that they were giving him. He looked pretty composed. He looked pretty comfortable. I'm sure he was nervous, but he didn't show it. And I think this was a really good debut for the new future quarterback of the Ohio State Buckeyes. That Ohio State defense looked great. First-year coordinator Matt Patricia did a really good job at throwing different looks at Arch Manning, making it really hard for him. And I seen tweets, one specifically from, if I'm not mistaken, was Dan Orlovsky, saying that basically Steve Sarkisian, head coach of the Texas Longhorns, had the training wheels on Arch Manning and how you should take the training wheels off a talent like Arch Manning. But I think that's just not giving the Ohio State defense credit and Matt Patricia credit for just making it hard for Arch, especially with him being on the road. It was loud in there. I'm not sure if he knew what he was looking at. They just made it really hard for him to go deep. And you seen when Arch did take shots deep, they just was either in double coverage, incompleted passes, and he threw an interception at one point in the game. So I think that's really demoralizing and can really shake a quarterback's confidence, especially when you're asked to go downfield and playing from behind. So that was just a lot of pressure. I don't think that means Arch isn't going to be good. I still think Arch could be a first-round talent quarterback. I've seen a lot of good things to like about him. But again, this was just his first start. Honestly, outside of Julian Sain, this was honestly probably the hardest position to be put in as a quarterback, going on the road against the defending champions, against a team who still has a lot of key players on defense, such as Caleb Downs, who a lot of scouts who were at the game said looked really good. He played like he Palomalu, Ed Reed mix, bro. Caleb Downs really gets after it. He made a lot of big plays, and he made that last 4th down stop to kind of put the nail in the coffin to give Ohio State the win. So a really solid, exciting game to open up week 1 of college football. It wasn't that great if you just look at the scoreboard, but if you just enjoy the sport, if you enjoy the chess aspect of the game where both defenses are just being really tactical, really fun game to watch. And this is the first time Texas has gone on 1 since 2018. Again, I don't think it's a big deal. I love how we started off the season with a heavyweight matchup. And I also love that with the new college playoff rules, with it being 12 teams, it allows us to have more big games without teams being penalized for playing those big games. I think, in my opinion, that was the reason why we didn't see as many big games before the new playoff rule, was just because it's 4 teams that can make it. So that's it. So it's one of those things where you can have a bad week in week 9 and be undefeated up until that point. And you could lose a tough road game like Arch Manning and Ohio State, and that would essentially kill your playoff chances. But now with this new playoff format, it allows teams to take on big games and not get penalized for playing these big games. And they kept it close, so maybe it could help them down the road when it comes to seeding. Who knows? But really solid game. Julian Sain will be all right. Arch Manning will be all right. Both teams will be all right. And God forbid anybody get hurt, we will see both of those teams playing in the college football playoff this winter. Moving on to another big game that happened right after that, Alabama Crimson Tide took on the Florida State Seminoles at Florida State. Alabama opened this game. Last time I checked, they opened up the game 13.5-point favorites on the road. They also had a new quarterback in Ty Simpson. Florida State had a new quarterback in Tommy Queso. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I ain't even going to try to pronounce his last name because I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm just calling him Tommy Queso. Early this summer, Tommy Queso was talking a little crazy. He was saying how without Nick Saban, Alabama basically wasn't the same. He wasn't worried about him without Nick Saban. And a lot of Alabama players, as they should, took heart to that. And that just really helped build that big main event feel. Even though we just got done watching Texas, Ohio State, we came back with another heavy hitter. And, you know, with outside things like that go into the game, it just makes it that much more fun of a watch. So I was really interested to see if Tommy Queso was able to back it up at the crib, which he was able to do, man. He completed 14 passes for 152 yards, had 78 rushing yards and 1 TD. He really looked like Kyler Murray out there, man. A dual threat quarterback. He displayed some really good passes, especially a deep shot on 3rd and 11 to Squirrel White to kind of start off that first touchdown drive. He was really good with his legs, really good at, you know, extending plays. And a lot of plays that he made was because he had the ability to get away from that Alabama defense. So really impressive job by him. I'm going to be honest, I wasn't too sold on him coming out of Boston College. But after seeing this, I think, not that I thought he was a bad player, but I just had my questions, especially opening up against a team like Alabama. But he definitely stood on what he was saying. Respect to him. Shout out to him. He's a baller. And I can't wait to see, you know, what he does for the rest of the season. Florida State, they were 2-10 last year. And that was as hype as I've seen that crowd since the Jordan Travis days. So it looks like Florida State might be back, man. Ty Simpson, new quarterback for the Alabama Crimson Tide. His first start, if I'm not mistaken. He didn't look too bad either. He didn't look great, but a lot of good signs you can take away from the game. He threw the ball over 40 times and had 2 touchdowns on the road against a tough Florida State team. So kind of following the trend from last game, playing tough competition and performing decent or well, I think is something we should measure, is a better measuring stick tool to use versus just expectations we put on them from he say, she say, or what Vegas might put on them expectation-wise as far as how many passing yards they might throw. Outside of looking at that, he made some good throws. He made some simple throws. Some things that you could change, but overall, I don't think he'll be the reason for Alabama not being a great team if they don't pan out. I think the thing that hurts Alabama the most is they just don't look disciplined. And a bright spot, though, for the Alabama offense was wide receiver Jeremy Bernard. He had 8 catches, 146 yards. He had a solid start to his senior year. Clearly, Ty Simpson's favorite target this game. Ryan Williams, he was in the game, but he just didn't look, you know. I don't know. I'm a fan of Ryan Williams, and I think he'll be really good, but he just had a really tough game. Maybe it's week 1 jitters. Maybe that's just Florida State's defense, you know, scheming him, taking him out the game. I want to see how he does later down the season before I just give my – I've been seeing a lot of tweets saying that Ryan Williams is overrated. And I was seeing tweets like that during the season last year. Yeah, he had a big game against Georgia and things like that. But he also had many other games where he flew under the radar. So with players like that who are super hot one week, super cold the next week, you know, I'm not too quick to judge him. And simply because he's young and he's still learning. And Florida State's not a bad team, so I'm not going to be quick to jump on the Ryan is washed or overrated bandwagon. But I am watching him closely a little more now just to see, you know, if he still got it, which I think he does, and I think he'll be fine. But Giovanni Bernard was a bright spot for that wide receiver room, and hopefully him having a good senior year can open up some looks for somebody like Ryan Williams. So Kalen DeBoer had a rough start last year to the Alabama standard as far as coaching. This year he loses his first game. I'm not quick to jump on coaches and saying that they need to be fired or they need to get their job took. I'm never one of those guys who pushes that narrative because they got to feed their families and stuff like that. But I am interested to see how long the leash is for a guy like Kalen DeBoer. You know, that's the pressure that comes with following behind the greatest coach in college football history in Nick Saban. is that when he leaves, he built such a high standard and the expectation. Fans, the expectation of Alabama is different, man. Once you win so much, that's what fans become accustomed to. And when you're not doing that, then it's deemed as a bad season and they turn on you. So obviously, I think he'll have a winning record. I looked at the schedule. I see an easy path to 9 wins, but that's not going to cut it in Tuscaloosa. So I wouldn't be surprised if they start calling for Kalen DeBoer's job, especially if he still loses a lot of these big games. I think, especially when we get in the SEC play, I hope he can figure it out. But if he doesn't seem to, hit that switch and figure it out, I do think that I wouldn't be surprised if Alabama fans start calling for a new head coach. But I hope Kalen figures it out. Really good head coach. It's just tough coaching Alabama, man, and following behind those footsteps and Nick Saban. So, moving on. LSU versus Clemson, the late afternoon night game. Grant Nussmeier versus Cade Klubnik. Unlike the last 2 games, both of these quarterbacks are second-year starters, if I'm not mistaken. I know Grant's a second year. I don't know if this might be Cade's second year starting too. But LSU does beat Clemson on the road. First 1-0 start in the Brian Kelly era. About time he got that first win. The players were walking out in 1-0 t-shirts. And honestly, I thought Clemson was going to win the game. And I just don't like when teams get a little too... confidence is good, obviously, but things like that can turn you into a meme real quick if you don't back it up. But thankfully for them, they did back it up, and they do start off 1-0. Big win on the road for them. Grant Nussmeier had a really good game. He completed 28 passes, had 230 yards, and threw 4 touchdowns, and just did a really good job at managing the game. He, in his past, was known to be kind of like a gunslinger and a guy who just had a high interception rate. In a game like this against Clemson, I honestly expected him to throw a turnover or two, to throw an interception or two. But he did a really good job in managing the game. He even had a series of plays where they ran the same play 3 times, and it worked all 3 times, so they didn't shy away from it, which I think sometimes can be seen as too good to be true, or some quarterbacks can just get too happy and just, take a shot. He was really disciplined against this Clemson defense, who was one of the top defenses in the nation. So really impressive performance by Garrett Nussmeier. And honestly, he would have had another touchdown and more yards. He had a really good throw to Barry and Brown. They said it didn't count as a catch. I'll play it right here. I thought it was a catch, but outside of even though those didn't count, still had a really good day if you were just a numbers guy and look at the numbers. But he really had 2 touchdowns, so really solid performance by Nussmeier. Antonio Williams, wide receiver 1 in Clemson. He left the game early with a hamstring injury. I ain't gonna lie, I was already questionable on the Clemson offense. But once he went down, the question mark just became even bigger. And I think it was clear that the offense just kind of struggled to get it going. Cade Klubnik, I'm not one of those guys that's going to get up here and say, oh, this player sucks, this player is not good. I'm not too sure about him, to be honest. I don't know. I don't want to jump to a conclusion, but I don't know. Younger brother of A.J. Terrell, Avion Terrell, he had a pretty solid game. I read some things where there was some scouts at that game too, and he was receiving late first round, early second round grades for this upcoming draft. So if he continues to stay on that pace, it looks like A.J. Terrell's little brother will be joining him in the league next year. So hopefully he stays healthy and keeps balling out. Moving on to the next game, Oregon versus Montana State. Oregon and new quarterback Dante Moore put up 59 points against Montana State. Dante completed 23 passes for 213 yards and 3 touchdowns. He looks really good. Oregon gets a new quarterback. Another team that has a new quarterback with Dylan Gabriel going to the NFL. He seemed to be pretty good. It was against Montana State. No shot against them boys, but a lot of people will say, well, he didn't play anybody, so he looked solid. And I don't know who the Oregon receiver was. It might have been their freshman receiver, but it was a play where their receiver had made a block, and he drove somebody all the way through the touchdown. That was a really good effort play, and just really good signs from your receivers that they're eager to block for their teammates. Again, it was against Montana State. Shout out to them boys, but Oregon looked good to kick off the season. Georgia took on Marshall, another high-profile school with another starting quarterback. We did see some Gunnar Stockton last year with Carson Beck getting hurt, but this was Gunnar's first start as a Bulldog. He completed 24 passes, had 73 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. So Gunnar displayed his dual threat ability, which I wasn't aware of, to be honest. Again, we did see him play last year, but that was more in bigger games. So I guess the leash was let off a little bit, and he had a summer to kind of, train as that starting quarterback and step into that role. So really impressive showing by Gunnar Stockton in Georgia. Zachariah Branch had 3 catches for 90-plus yards and a touchdown. He looked phenomenal, transfer from USC. Haven't heard a lot of people talk about Georgia, at least out this way, as far as real contenders for the national championship. Obviously, according to Vegas and things like that, they'll have one of the higher odds just because of the prestige of the program. But I think they're real contenders for winning that national championship. So we'll see. But Georgia looked good. Michigan took on New Mexico. Again, another high-profile school with the new quarterback. Unlike these other schools, or most of these other schools, Michigan had a true freshman in Bryce Underwood under center today, and he looked really solid. Bryce completed 21 passes for 251 yards, and he also threw a touchdown. He had a drop touchdown that was in the red zone, which is kind of a shaky throw, but could have had 2 touchdowns, but he looked really good. He displayed his arm strength, avoided the big mistakes, and just a really solid, impressive performance from a freshman quarterback in Bryce Underwood. Physically, he was out there laying blocks. He just already fits the build. He fits the mold. He has the look. So God forbid he gets hurt or anything. I think Michigan has their new starting quarterback of the future in Bryce Underwood. Really solid performance. He kind of like a Josh Allen, Cam Newton mixture from like a size standpoint, arm standpoint. He didn't really have a lot of rushing yards. I think he honestly had like -5 rushing yards, but he has the ability to get loose in open space, and he'll just be a hard guy to bring down. So really excited to see, what he molds into as a quarterback. Only a true freshman, so we'll be seeing this guy for another 3 years. Justice Hayes, though, was the star of that game. Transfer from Bama with only 16 carries. He had 159 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he was running all over them boys in New Mexico. And when you got a good run game, I really like when teams help their quarterback situation. So a team like Michigan, when you have a really good run game, that can make the job a lot easier, which you want it to be for a freshman quarterback in Bryce Underwood. Slows the game down for him. The defense has to anticipate the rush, fill in the box, which ultimately gives Bryce Underwood easier and better looks down the field when throwing the ball. So if Michigan can keep up this running game, I think that'll be a huge testament in the Bryce Underwood experiment and how he develops and becomes one of the elite quarterbacks in college football. One more player that I want to shine light on. To end the night, we did see UCLA take on Utah. Following the trend, both big schools with 2 new quarterbacks. Nico, the new quarterback of the UCLA Bruins, and Devin Dampier, the new quarterback of the Utah Utes. Nico and UCLA, they had a really tough time on offense, only putting up 10 points. There was a video of him after the game limping and had a cast around his wrist, so hopefully he's okay. First game jitters, first game with the team. They weren't expected to win a lot of games, so hopefully they can build from this and learn from this, that being UCLA. But Devin Dampier, man, he balled out. Transfer. I think he went to New Mexico State last year, if I'm not mistaken, or New Mexico. But he balled out in his Utah debut. He completed 21 out of 25 of his passes, racking up 205 yards passing. He also threw for 2 tutties, and he ran the ball for 16 times, had 87 yards and a touchdown with his legs. So a really good dual threat performance by him. Kind of gave me Kyler Murray vibes. And after watching this game, I would say Utah is my favorite to win the Big 12. I haven't checked the Vegas odds, but I'm sure they would probably be leading it, and if not, be top 2. So really solid performance by Devin, and just a really solid performance overall by a lot of these players, and a real bunch of exciting Week 1 games. We got one more game off the week, with that being Miami versus Notre Dame. I'm gonna show y'all the time so y'all know I'm not capping when I make this prediction. All right, so it's 2:42 on Sunday. Carson Beck wins it, man. I'm not too sure about that new Notre Dame quarterback, C.J. Parker, I think is his name, or something like that. Carson Beck, national champion. New system in Miami, but, he's got some players on offense he can throw the ball to. With Miami going against Notre Dame today, I do have the Miami Hurricanes winning this ball game. I love what they do over there in Notre Dame. But they lost a lot of big players over there on that defensive side of the ball. No Benjamin Morris, no Xavier Watts, who I was big fans of last year. I know they still have a solid defense, but I don't know, man. I'm just leaning towards Miami. I'm not one of those guys who's a big Carson Beck hater. I just think, at home, an experienced quarterback at home, I just think he gets the job done against a first-time starter on the road. I think they just have to make the game simple for him, take what they give, take care of the ball. It'll be Carson Beck's biggest thing. And if Carson Beck can take care of the ball, I got the Miami Hurricanes beating the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. So that's the week 1 recap. This is something I'm going to do every Sunday as far as recapping the season, giving my opinion. So stay tuned, and college football is back.